we're thinking about this with these students in mind. We're not asking them to bend their life to us. We're actually figuring out what could we do to make sure we're meeting them where they are and taking them where they need to go. For us, it's just this constant design challenge of figuring out how we create the family of experiences that will help our students learn, finish strong, and launch confidently.
That was Mark Milliron, president of National University. Mark was joined on the podcast by his colleague Angela Baldasare, who is their SVP for Research, Strategy, and Planning. And the three of us had a terrific conversation about understanding adult learners who lead complicated lives, and then redesigning programs, policies, practices, and partnerships to help them succeed. We go from their big picture goal to champion a national movement down into the details about the data they collect and the metrics they use and much more. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected College podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and how they're organized to enable student success. And if you're a leader in higher ed and you think that the silos and separations get in the way of student success, then this podcast and my book, The Connected College, are for you. We're here to learn and work together to bust silos, question tradition, and forge partnerships so that students feel connected to their college, their community, their coursework, and their careers. Welcome, Mark and Angela. I'm so excited about our conversation focused on designing for the Anders, right? Students that are students and parents, students and veterans, students and employees, and hearing about all the great stuff you're doing at National University.
Glad to be here, Elliot. Glad to be in the mix. And I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Angela Baldasare, one of our chief troublemakers here at National University.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us, Elliot.
A great place to get started is hearing how you both did. So maybe, Angela, tell us a little bit about how you got started in higher ed and what you're up to today.
Sure. I began my journey in higher education with an academic career as an assistant professor of sociology. And I left that because I actually wanted more tangible impact on social problems. I loved teaching, but I also wanted to be able to move the needle and think macro. And so I left that. I went into 10 years of work in the government and nonprofit sector and things like program evaluation, grant writing, and technical assistance to communities, helping to implement change via funding from HHS, Justice, Highway Safety, and all kinds of government agencies and funding streams. Made that move back into higher ed after 10 years of that government and nonprofit sector, back into this time on the administrative side, but still really squarely focused on using data primarily to implement change and to get to good outcomes, which has really been the central thread of my career, no matter the domain. And so I like to live in that nexus between data and practice. In higher ed, my whole jam has been about student success. It's really been about how do we connect the dots between institutional strategy, how we finance the institution, how we run the institution, what we offer, how it's structured, and how all of those things come together to create the right environment for student success.
That's great. Do you think this data thing is really going to take off, or are people just going to keep going with their gut?
Might be a thing.
It might be. Mark, what's your story?
I came from a large, diverse family of 9 kids. I have an African-American brother, Native American brother, Korean sister, and we had 25 foster kids who rotated through my house during the time I was growing up. And when I graduated high school at 17, there really wasn't any knowing about higher education. And so I broke the mold and actually defied my parents and went to a community college that was nearby and started busing tables and waiting tables and paying my way through school. And so that was really instructive. I learned a lot about the power of access institutions, about the importance of having flexible models that allow you to work and succeed on the world in education, but really fell in love with teaching while I was at Arizona State University, especially during my master's program, and then went on to get my doctorate at UT Austin. And really just decided to dedicate my life to education in particular as something that could open up pathways to possibilities. What was funny, Elliot, is once I got my bachelor's degree, my mom was like, Mark can do it. Everybody can do it. So all my brothers and sisters after got some kinds of degrees, which is great. If you look at the variety of different roles I've been able to play over the last 35 years, I've been blessed to work with some amazing people and some really dynamic organizations, all of them focused on trying to help more and more diverse students be more successful in higher education pathways. And that has been the red thread of my work. I have been totally dedicated, whether it was working with advanced analytics organizations or with the State Department or with universities or with community colleges, whatever seat I was in, or with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I was always trying to figure out how we can bring the tools, the technologies, the policies, and the practices together to help more of our striving students be more successful than ever before. So I've been really blessed to work with a lot of people deeply dedicated to student success. So that is, as Angela said, has been my jam for decades.
Well, I like that it's a jam, it's a red thread, it's so many things, student success. I would love to hear your definitions. Of course, there's no one definition, but how do you both define student success?
Well, Angela, we could go into our measures of student success, but I'm gonna get real basic on this one. To me, understanding the kind of aspirations of students and helping them get on that pathway really matters. I'm gonna just say two things. One, I think it's very clear that institutions that care deeply about their students want to be dedicated to helping them learn well, finish strong on that higher education pathway, and then launch confidently into whatever the next adventure is going to be. And those three elements all matter and are all a piece and a part of what we're talking about when you talk about student success and the kind of larger journey. But secondly, when I'm thinking about higher education, I get really upset and frustrated by folks who get pretty reductive around just completion. We want students just to complete. And when we launched the completion agenda, when we were at the Gates Foundation, we actually fought some of that because of the kind of reductive notice of that. We say out loud at National University, because we know who our students are, they don't come to us to get a degree. Full stop. They come to us to change their lives. They have made a choice to enter an education pathway because they want to change the trajectory of their lives. They want to go on a different journey. And often that degree is a means to that end, right? And in these days, it could actually be badges, certifications, degrees, not to mention its human connections, its experiences. So our job is to curate the family of experiences that include classes and completion and connections that will help them get on that pathway to change in their lives. And so in our work, we are pretty expansive about trying to make sure we find the measures that help tell us whether or not we're on or off track towards helping those students get on those pathways to possibilities. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Angela, you can go.
It echoes many of the same hallmarks. For me, student success is ensuring that every student, no matter what their age and stage, as Mark would say, has that opportunity to transform their life through education. And that's meeting them where they are, understanding what they're here for, and supporting them in their challenge to learn and connect and achieve. And so that's it. It's pretty simple. Meeting them where they are is, I think, the part that institutions really struggle with. And that's a big part of that is, I think what we're here to talk about today is seeing them for who they are and why they're there.
That's such a great way of thinking about student success so that you're not confusing the means and the end, and you're not focusing on the degree so much as what the degree or the credential and the experiences that come with it enable, like changing your life. I'd love to hear a bit about how you're doing that at National. Tell us a little bit about your longtime focus on Anders. What is that and how do you do it?
Yeah, first and foremost, just to explain what an Ander is. We refer to our students as Anders because they are, without exception, they are students and parents. They are students and employed. They are students and deployed, students and elder care. Like there's this family of ands that they bring with them to our organization. And part of National University's design challenge from day one has been meeting students where they are on these complicated journeys and taking them where they're going to go. And our root story basically was Navy Captain PhD, Dr. David Chigos, who was back in 1971, heartbroken watching service members coming out of Vietnam, trying to use their GI Bill with traditional education institutions. And they were not succeeding at the level they should have been succeeding. And he knew that in his heart of hearts. And it wasn't because they were bad students. It was because they were Anders. They had complicated lives. They were trying to raise families. They were trying to work full time. They had deployment challenges. And higher education, it's not beating up those traditional institutions. They weren't designed for that. They were designed for a very different kind of student. So he actually worked with a group of former officers and academics and went to WASC and said, we want to design something completely focused on non-traditional working and military students. And that's where National University was founded. And you fast forward 54 years later, we 250,000 alumni in all 50 states and 20 countries. We serve about 50,000 students a year, another 80,000 in workforce training, contract training. About a third of our degree students are doctoral, about a third are master's, third are bachelor's, number one college of education in the state of California, big law school. But 100% of our students are still non-traditional working military. They are Anders. And what's been great for us is we know who we are. We know who we serve. If you're going to be a faculty member at NU, if you're going to be an advisor, if you're going to be an administrator, guess who we're serving? And we literally have training programs around the students that we care about, including training in military backgrounds. We use something called psych armor training. And then even the Anders, we have an Anders training course for our employees that are coming in. But we're designing what we do around the Anders population. And what's great about the work that Angela gets to do is Angela, traditional research arms that work in universities are very focused on iPads and traditional definitions. Like she gets to play with a very expansive definition of our students and make sure we are capturing those journeys and understanding what's working and what's not.
And I think that's really important because the data is actually very hard to get in the United States about Anders. But the NCES data, in as much as it can offer, even that has shown us that these Anders, these non-traditional working students with all of these different roles and identities in their lives, have been the majority of U.S. college goers since the mid-1990s. But our policy environment, our practices, the infrastructure of higher education has not kept up with the changing demographic of higher education. It is still aimed at traditional first-time in college freshmen by measure, right, by funding mechanism, all of it. And so there's so much that institutions are left to do for themselves to even discover and see this population.
And we actually have launched something called the Anders campaign, Elliot. And the Anders campaign, if you go to nu.edu/Anders, you're going to learn more about the campaign. And part of the campaign is, one, let's see these students and help people realize, like, whenever I say the word college student to a large audience, I'll tell them to picture a college student and I'll have them close their eyes. And then they open their eyes and I say, how many of you thought of a 36-year-old woman with 3 kids? How many of you thought of a deployed service member? How many of you thought a construction worker working on the telephone lines? No, what they all thought of was a 19-year-old with a backpack on the quad. And that first-time full-time freshman living on campus not working is 19% of higher ed. The vast majority of higher ed, far more complicated. So job one in the Anders campaign is let's see them. Job two is let's look at the policy environment and figure out where are the policies holding these students back. There are literally institutions that won't serve these students because they don't want to hit these iPad traps in terms of their grad rates and things that'll happen out of it. What are the practice changes you have to make? And then what are the partnerships you can develop, whether it's with the military or with employers or with others, that'll make it easier for these students to be more effective. Angela and I have been leading these things called Anders Summits.
We're pulling together a broad cross-section of community members and students and alumni, but that community member section, other educators, policymakers, philanthropists, business partners, all of those community members that make up that nexus of partnerships with an institution and stakeholders in an institution. We pull them together, and then we do basically community-based research. We do affinity mapping sessions with those community members to focus on what are the policies that need to be addressed, changed, or implemented in order for higher education to better serve Anders. What are the practices that we need to implement or change? And then what are the partnerships that are needed? And so we break them up into 3 rooms. Everybody rotates through the 3 rooms. We have this wonderful affinity map then of what do we need to do and think about and propose for this new roadmap for higher education. And it's not about National University. This is about higher ed writ large. This is about affecting that macro policy environment
Yeah.
and practices that we all use and the partnerships that we form and that help fuel higher education for our students. This is a year-long research project that we're undergoing in different locations across the United States, and we're super excited for what we can learn and share.
This approach and the language and everything about it really resonates with me and is sorely and surely needed. And if step one is seeing all students quantitatively, qualitatively, to serve all students, and then step two is changing policies and practices and partnerships to make it happen, can you give us some examples of when you design for Anders, what are the policies you have to change or create now that you've seen them and understand them? What are the practices? What are the partnerships?
I'll just give some concrete examples. On the policy side, it's things like your transfer policies and your articulation work. 85% of our students in our undergrad population come from community colleges. And so having really strong, effective transfer agreements so that students don't lose credit in transfer is a big deal.
The average is like you lose 40% of your credits, I think.
And we don't want them to lose a single one. It's assessment of prior learning. So, for example, we've got partnerships, going to the partnership side, with the local police departments. And if you're finishing your post program, which is your police academy, you're literally using the same textbooks as our first 7 courses in our criminal justice program. So can we actually credit map that into your criminal justice degree? So we've done that. So those are the kinds of policies that we're talking about. And then practices are a combination of online learning, hybrid learning, thinking about what you're doing with facilities, thinking about your student support strategies, your scholarshiping, all those kinds of things. And then on the partnerships, are you working with their military partners? Are you working with your employers to really focus on employer tuition and support strategies for those folks and figuring out how those can pull in? Are you partnering, for example, with K-12 to build really strong clinical arrangements? If you're training rising teachers, you have to have clinical sites. We have 2,600 clinical sites around California, and that's where we're building these big structural partnerships with these school districts so we can get better together at getting those teachers ready to be able to move forward. But all that means we're thinking about this with these students in mind. We're not asking them to bend their life to us. We're actually figuring out what could we do to make sure we're meeting them where they are and taking them where they need to go.
It sounds like a very specific instantiation of, instead of bemoaning the lack of college-ready students, you're becoming a student-ready college in a very specific way. And most people here, they think about Anders or non-traditional or post-traditional students, and they think online asynchronous. And so facilities or clinical sites might not be top of mind. Let's pull on that thread a little bit. What role do campus facilities or other kinds of spaces play in student success for Anders?
Some of the things that we've learned in looking at our students and trying to understand these Anders is, what are the unmet needs that create barriers for them in academic success and in having a great experience at an institution? And they're not surprising, right? For many of these, it's coordinated, easy to access services and responsiveness by an institution to them on their time, which is limited. It's access to childcare for so many. It's access to a quiet space where they can do their work. If they're a busy person, they go to work during the day, they come home, there's the kids at home at night, or elder care situation. But where is the time and the space for them to focus? And they're carving that out around the edges. And so we came up with this concept of, really, it's third space, right? It's the same concept that Starbucks had back in the day for the coffee shop. And it's third space is something that religious institutions and community centers have provided. So we needed third space for our students where they could come, have a quiet space to study, access technology, access childcare, have food and drink, go to class. And so the concept of the nest was born, and we started working with our community partners to see how we could bring this together. And so we have a great partnership with the YMCA of San Diego to offer childcare for our students, right? We have technology labs, innovation lab, makers lab kind of thing, where students can go in and use 3D printers and the best of technology. They can check out a laptop. There's food and drink. There's classroom spaces. There's private learning spaces. There's a veterans center with a food pantry. So much great opportunity to create that third space that's specifically dedicated to our students that helps meet them where they are.
The Nest has been really dynamic because it's almost like a WeWork for learners, right? It's a space where they can come in and they can connect. But the no or low cost childcare partnership with the YMCA is amazing. We also partnered with our own Harmony program. National University runs a program called Harmony, which is one of the largest kind of trainers of social emotional learning relationship skills for kiddos. That program is amazing, by the way. There's actually a Harmony at Home app, which works directly with parents. But we have our Sanford Harmony Clubhouse in the Nest. So we actually run programming for kids and for families within there. We've ended up just putting some of our best of our stuff together to figure out what would help our students. But it's not for every student, but for the students who want to touch down there and connect, it's really neat. But our job is to learn, to figure out how effective that is and understand what kind of impact that has on learning and persistence and completion. And we're all in the process of doing that right now. But that is combined with design strategies. That's a design strategy, by the way, we can partner with community colleges and open up nests on community college campuses all around the country, on YMCA campuses, wherever it makes sense. But we also do things like, what is really frustrating is for us, people think, oh, serving non-traditional working or military students means just do what you already do, but do it at night, which is like the worst, most hackneyed version of it. Yeah, night courses are important for some students, but it is, or just, now it's just do it online. So no, it's actually what the design is different. So for example, probably our most unique design feature are 4-week classes. What we have found is cognitive load is the big issue with our students. Not that they can't take a full load. It's just taking 5 courses over 16 weeks where you're raising kids and working full time doesn't work. Because if life happens at any point along the way, you got to drop 5 classes, right? So 1 course at a time, 4 weeks works really well for our students. And we've learned this over basically 50 years of doing this work. That design feature, we have 4-week classes, 8-week classes. We've got one-on-one models, very much like the WGU model, which we've been doing for 50 years. That's our heavy graduate program. It's an Oxford model of graduate education. Combined with, again, the synchronous learning opportunities, we've got an amazing library resource. It's available synchronously and asynchronously. And we have a great online commons that's available for our folks. But we also have live community events. And like I said, 5,000 clinical sites on ground with partners all across the country. So for us, it's just this constant design challenge of figuring out how we create the family of experiences that will help our students learn, finish strong, and launch confidently. One of our real challenges, I know, Ellie, you've helped people think about pathways like work and larger student success. You get really frustrated when people almost talk about college like it's really a collection of classes. And if we can get that collection of classes right and check the box where we're successful,
Right.
like that's beyond frustrating for me. College is not a collection of classes. It is a family of experiences that happens to include classes, but it also includes your co-curricular, your relationships, your larger kind of experiences at the institution from first contact to the time you're an alumni. Our job is to take somebody from enrollment to endowment, right? We want them fully connected with the institution. So that's our design challenge.
This approach really resonates with me, like using a space to enable student success and wraparound services just makes so much sense. And my not so hidden agenda has been to reimagine libraries as student success hubs for a couple of decades now, because it's a great way to meet students where they are and provide the kind of support services that you're talking about and normalize getting that help and support, making it more visible, making it more accessible. You're doing that I think in a really interesting way and looking at it holistically. Like during the early days of the pandemic, when students were asking for a discount because all their classes were online, if you can remember that far, looking back through the COVID fog, we did our national student experience survey. We put in a question because I thought this is an interesting question. I wonder what students really do value. So we did a nationally representative survey and we asked, how would you allocate your tuition by percentage? Classes, support services, technology, the campus, so forth. And classes were only 50%. I think students recognize that, as you're saying, you need this whole family, this whole constellation of experiences that support each other and create this positive feedback loop. So I really admire this approach. And I know you've been at this for a while. I also would love to see you shine up your crystal ball and look into the future. And I hear from you about what's changing about this. How will policies, practices, partnerships, how are they going to keep evolving so that you can keep supporting Anders into the future?
We will know we have made our mark when the Anders conversation is one that is ubiquitous, with people designing better programs for Anders. And here's the other thing, Elliot, it's really important to us is I can't tell you how many people run up to us now and want to tell us their Anders story. Yeah, I was an Ander. I did this, I did that. And they're really proud of being an Ander. Once we talk about it and showcase it, boy, they want to come up and talk about, hey, I had to do this. I worked. My wife really supported me. My husband supported me, or this. My kids were cheering at the graduation, whatever it's going to be. And it's just so inspiring. But so many of them talk about this idea that they're almost in some ways apologetic about having to go on a non-traditional journey through education sometimes. So much to the point where they don't even talk about it, like with other people, because they didn't just go to a very standard traditional kind of institution. We're going to know we're winning in this when we completely, deeply normalize and actually celebrate the Ander journey. And we have more people like doing the policy work, the practice work, the partnership work to make it more likely that these students can be successful. Because right now, if you look at the data, around 43 million people at some college and no credential, the vast majority of them left in good academic standing. And a big chunk of them leave because the institutions are not designed for them. They have complicated lives. So part of it is, can we make a big dent in that? And by the way, I think that number is eclipsed by the millions more who never put their toe in the water because they didn't think they could do it. They didn't think it was possible for somebody like them. So our job is to, one, celebrate, normalize, and help the educational infrastructure embrace this population, including with things like, can we get much better at employer tuition assistance? We haven't changed the 5250 policy since 1984. We're still only allowing companies to write off $5,250 for employer tuition assistance. That number should be at $15,000. So we're on the case for that. We're trying to raise military tuition assistance. We think tuition assistance is to the working student what the Pell Grant is to the traditional student. So that's the policy work we've got to do. And these are the kind of things where if we can make this change, really good things can happen. Now, for us to get on that journey and to, again, make sure we're more effective with these students, our partners are more effective with our policymakers, we've got to make sure we do the work internally of asking hard questions about what's working and what's not, and understanding how to. So Angela began her work with us doing loss and momentum studies to understand where were we losing students, what was creating momentum, and helping us think about how we design it. And now we're really looking in a deep way at everything from NPS scores to our own version of engagement scores, together with, are we increasing the total number of credentials given, persistence, and graduation? We're getting better and smarter at this, including rolling out predictive models and trying to help make sure we're democratizing the data.
You mentioned that we're democratizing the data, and I think that's the table stakes here, is making sure that we are, as an institution, being good stewards of our data. It comes in through multiple systems, right? It's messy, it's disconnected. We've got a great team on our data engineering and architecture side that's building our data warehouse. For us, it's such a complicated institution with a merger a few years ago. We've really had to work hard to integrate systems, unify systems, and get all the data together in one place. Serious work there around data governance, around getting all of our definitions in place and agreed upon, governed and approved. And then really now a hardcore focus on democratizing that data, getting it into useful tools and formats for the variety of users that we have around campus. And so that's on-demand reports, it's dashboards, it's clear visibility into our top 5 metrics for the institution. Those are the primary metrics by which we will judge our success. And as
what
Mark
are those? I would love to hear. What's your secret sauce? Five metrics.
Our 5 top metrics are our students will persist, right? So it's our overall 1-year persistence rate, and then tracking that persistence through to completion. Completion for sure, the overall graduation rate. It is total credentials awarded. And that includes all of our certificates and credentials, so those micro credentials as well. But then what happens in between there is very important to us, right? Students have to persist in order to complete, and they have to be engaged, right? They have to have a good experience. And so our student engagement metric is based on the model of the National Survey for Student Engagement, NSSE. But NSSE, like many other things in higher education, has that very explicit focus on traditional freshmen, right?
Not fit for Anders, right? Yeah.
Not built for Anders, right? It's the first-time freshman IPEDS cohort, and then that same cohort at graduation that gets into the NSSE data. And so we took the concepts and many of the constructs of NSSE, but we expanded and adapted those for National University into a custom metric that measures students' engagement across peer engagement, faculty engagement, engagement with their core academics, and engagement with support and services. And so we track overall student engagement. And then we track our Net Promoter Score, which is an industry standard, right? Net Promoter Score. It's that one question on a scale of 1 to 10. What is your likelihood to recommend National University to your friends and colleagues? And then the follow-up questions are, why did you give us that score? And tell us what we can do to improve. So with those 5 core metrics, we have learned so much, right, about our students' journey and our students' population, especially with engagement and with that NPS. The qualitative that we get off NPS alone is instructing us in so many ways about how do we improve, what's really driving students' experience at National University, and the blockers and the opportunities, what we're doing well and where we can improve. We've now dug in, we've revised, I think this one's really important too, our course evaluation survey. So course evaluation surveys across higher education have been really the same for decades, and they're highly contested spaces, as they're often used in faculty promotion and tenure decisions and things like that. We recently worked with our faculty and worked through faculty governance to upend that survey and turn it also into a short pulse. So instead of 17 to 20 some questions about multiple dimensions of the course that the students may or may not really relate to and resonate with, we ask them about their experience with their satisfaction with the course, with the faculty member, and questions about tell us why. Our response rate on the course evaluation survey itself has gone up from an abysmal 13% to over half of our students right out of the gate responding to that survey. And so we just finished full institution-wide implementation of this new survey in the fall and in the winter leading up to the winter break.
And our vision is world-class student experiences. We want to have world-class student experiences, which means you got to pay attention to them. You have to, this is why I love having almost a mini version of the NPS for courses, so that, because the faculty want that. They want information that they can use themselves to understand what's working and what's not. And it's basic questions like, would you recommend this course to somebody else? Tell us how would you rank the instructional resources? And just very basic stuff. And it's only 4 questions, Angela?
Yeah.
That's it.
4 questions. And it's available through multiple doors of entry,
Channels,
right? In the student portal. It's in their email and it's in the course shell.
There's another 20 plus metrics underneath that go against our strat plan. But the top 5 are the ones institutionally we point our strat plan at. Our board has a dashboard with all 5 of those with the live data. So they can go in at any time and disaggregate it and literally go deep. We have a few board members who are pretty serious about going in and disaggregating and asking questions, but they've never had anything like this at their fingertips. The engagement score, the net promoter score, that stuff we share with every dean. They go down and work with their program directors. Everybody's sharing this data out. We work with our advising core, and people are using this to start the conversations. And we have these things called our ways of work. We asked the entire institution at our best, what would people say about the way we work? And what came back were these 5 categories. And they were, boy, those folks champion student success. They build trust internally and externally. They advance inclusion. They see people, right? They embrace accountability. And my favorite, they make things better. And making things better is, instead of talking about innovation as a value, because innovation's way up here and not everybody can participate in that, make things better is every day at the
That's everybody's job.
And hey, it's pick up the trash in the parking lot, fix the drop-down menu. Every day you can do something to make the institution better. So all of these things that Angela's talking about start these make things better conversations about how can we do something about this, do something about this that pulls us up into that conversation. But that all begins with knowing who you serve and what you want in terms of the kind of a larger outcome. And that's why it's pretty exciting work. And boy, we just want to be a part of this movement. There are lots of other institutions that care about the kinds of students we care about. And you know what? Everything we're talking about can be stolen by people who are dealing with right from high school students who want to be good at this. It's just about being focused on that kind of that student experience in particular.
I can't think of a better place to end than talking about how it's everyone's job to make things better, from the parking lot to the coursework to the course evaluation. And Mark and Angela, I really appreciate your perspective and all the great work you're doing at National.
Thanks, you, Elliot. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Subscribe to my Connected College newsletter at elliottfelix.com for insights and excerpts from my book, tools you can download, and special offers. You can also find more information about talks I've given, articles I've written, and upcoming events there. And please support the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where students will succeed.